This is going to be a fun lesson where we're going to get into the gameplay. So we're going to do some calculations and conditions to check and ensure that there's progress within the game and allow the player to move on to the next steps. So once they deal, we want to enable the hit and stand, but this is also dependent on what the card values are and what actions the player needs to be able to take. So we're going to add in a new function. So under deal, and we can just call this update count. We're not passing any parameters in there. And this is where we're going to do the check and update of where the game progress is. So update count. And this function will run every time it's dealt and also serve as a way to kind of move things along. So we want to actually pick up the score value that's available within the player and the dealer. So that's going to be an important part, that we want to be able to track the score. So let's create another function that will calculate out the score. So we'll just call this function score. We'll call it scorer. And coming into update count, we want to be able to pick up the player's score and pass the game player hand into the score. So it's going to do a calculation of that array object. And then also we want a value for dealer, and using the same function, but we're passing in the dealer hand array values into there. And then within scorer, we're going to pick up those values and then make use of them. So essentially this can be a hand that's being passed in, and we need to calculate out the value that's contained within the hand and then return back a number value for the user. And I'll output the values of player and dealer. So we have to do some calculations here and return back the response. So let's set up some default values, and we're going to set them to 0, and if it's an ace, because we're going to have to account for possibility of multiple aces, so depending on what the score and what the value is, and loop through the hand array. So for now, what we can do is console log out the value of hand. So this is whatever's being passed in. And then right now, we'll just return back a value of 1. So let's press deal and see what happens. So clear, deal. And we see that both of those hands get passed in. And as you can see, it is an array. So this particular one has spades, rank, value, and as well king value. And then we also get the other hand that gets passed in. So we see that this is going to be the dealer's hand, and that's the player's hand. So we're passing in player's hand first, and then the dealer's hand second, and also it compares to what we see on the screen as well. So taking the hand array, I'm going to loop through each one of the items that are contained within the hand, and we can output it as card, and then just console log out the value of whatever's contained within card. So we hit deal, we get each one of the cards as output there, and that's going to loop through. And this way we can update the total. So we've got a running total of whatever's available within the particular hand that's been passed in, and make sure that it is a number. So we're going to use the number method to force it to be a numeric value. And then we can also return back the total if we want. And also forcing total to be a number. So we're returning back the counted values. So the dealer has 11 and the player has 20. So we're turning those back in. And there's a little bit more we're going to have to do with score. But for now, let's go back to the update count. And we can update the count values that are contained for each one of those. So we can apply various conditions depending on what's being returned back. So first, let's add in the count for the player. So under the game player score, set the text content. So that's where we've got that dash there, and we're going to update it to whatever the value that's being returned back from play. And so we got a value of 13 there. It looks like we have to apply a little bit of styling as well. So going into our style sheet, I'm going to update a value for score. I'm going to do display block and make the font size bigger, and then also adjust a margin of 15 pixels at the top and then 0 at the bottom. And that moved our default card. So we need to make an adjustment for that as well. So it looks about right. So now we're taking up a default spot there for score, and we're outputting the player's score. So we have to also go back and we have to enable the buttons. And this is going to allow the player to have an additional action. So if the player is under 21, then using that turn on and selecting the game button hit, we're going to enable that. And then we also want to turn on the game button stand so that the user has an option for moving the game along. And that's only if it's under 21. And then also under game status, let's update the text content and say stand or take another card. So we'll provide some instructions for the user on what their next course of action can be. And there's more that we're going to have to do, more conditions we're going to have to add in. And we'll do that in the upcoming lesson. So now we've got the option to hit and stand. So we've enabled those buttons and we can continue with the gameplay for the player. So coming up, the second part of building the update count, as well as updating the scorer in order to handle the game functionality.